Hello and welcome to Hattie Knits Along. My name's Allison, but my friends call me Hattie, and I'm a knitter living in the Pacific Northwest. On this channel, I like to talk about all things knitting, what I'm working on, what you're working on, and what we are currently nerding out about. So if this sounds like something you're into, I hope you subscribe so you never miss a video. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing what's on my needles right now. I have a brand new cast on as well as a finished object to share. And I also want to share how these projects are fitting into my knitting resolutions of 2025. So grab your knitting and stick around. It's a new year and I have a new filming location. I hope that this location works out, but if it doesn't, I will be happy to move back to my couch in front of the window. But I'm just trying out something a little different. My first project that I'm going to talk to you about today is a work in progress that I cast on January 5th. So this is a pretty new project that I have on my needles, just a week in, and it is the Easy V sweater by Caitlin Hunter. This sweater is a deep V neck with a ribbed collar and color work throughout a circular yoke. And then there's also some color work on the sleeves before the cuffs. So let me show you what I have so far. I just put this on some barber cord so that I could really stretch it out all the way. I'm using the same yarn that Caitlin used when she designed this sweater, and that is the Ritual Dyes Elder in the color Clay, which is 100% Rambouillet yarn, and it's a worsted weight. And then also Spin Cycle's Dream State, which is their worsted weight color shifting yarn, and I'm using 3 different colors of that. One is Stay Ready, which is like a black and brown and white kind of colorway, and then one is Wololo, which has some kind of jewel tones in it, blues and purples and reds, I think. And then Castaway is the third one, and that one has like light blue, orange, and some tan. Right now I have Wololo attached, so you can see the different kind of jewel tones that it has. I love the way the color work is working up in this because of those color shifting yarns. The color work yoke is much more dramatic looking than it would be if you were just using a solid color yarn. The color work chart itself is very simple. It does have a little bit of increasing in it, but the chart only goes up to 6 stitches at a time. So it's very easy to memorize what you're doing each round, and you don't have to be constantly watching the chart as you knit, which is very nice. And you're only using 2 colors at most at a time. A lot of times you're just using one color. So I really am enjoying this this chart and this color work. I have never knit a color work yoke sweater, so that's different and exciting. And I really like how this is turning out so far. Let me try this on now that I have it on barber cord so I can see how it's fitting. Yes. I really wanted the loose, open V-neck that Caitlin achieves in her sweater, and I was kind of in between doing the size 3 or the size 4 in terms of what the recommended ease is, and I decided to go with the 3, but I did end up sizing up my needles. I'm a little bit of a naughty knitter and I don't love swatching. perhaps that's something that I can work on this year, but I did not swatch for this sweater. And I do know that I tend to be a tighter knitter than what patterns usually call for. And I haven't knit a Caitlin Hunter pattern before, as far as I know. I just know that I tend to be tighter than almost every other pattern writer I have done. So I decided off the bat I was gonna size up on my needles. So for the ribbing, I did a size 5 when the pattern calls for a size 4. And I think that it looks really good with that needle size. For the color work, it even recommends perhaps sizing up a needle for the color work just because you don't want the color work to be too tight and bunched. And so I sized up to a size 7 off the bat, and I'm loving the fabric that this is making. I think that each stitch is very well placed. It's not too tight and bunched. And obviously there is a little bit of bunching where like I think blocking is going to help a lot, but I really like the size 7 for the color work. And once I get to the body of the sweater, I might size down to the recommended needle size, which is a 6, just because I do think that it's just stockinette in the round, and that will be a little bit bigger gauge than my color work would be naturally. So I think that makes sense. Plus, it's also going to be in this really bouncy and thick worsted weight Rambouillet yarn, the Elder by Ritual Dice. So I think that just tends to be thicker than the Dream State is anyways. So I think sizing down the needle might be good for the body portion. I'll play around with that and let you know what I decide to do. Oh, and I did look at my gauge on this, and I am pretty spot on to what the pattern calls for in terms of gauge. So I think as long as I keep looking at that and keeping an eye on it, I will be happy with how it turns out. I don't imagine it growing a ton when I block it, because while the color work is superwash wool, the Rambouillet is not, and I just don't really see that growing too much in blocking. And then color work, it'll lay flatter, but I don't think it's gonna grow super giant. So I'm not too worried about it getting too big. One thing I really liked about this pattern early on is that Caitlin has you place stitch markers along your round for the shoulders and the front and the back right away. You can really see what the front, especially while you're creating this V-neck, you can really see where the front and the back is, and then the shoulders as well. The shoulders have this nice detail on them here. So you could see I still have the stitch markers on there. This is the center front. And anyways, yeah, I just really like that because I think it helps me keep track of where I am in each round and the orientation of what I'm working on. So I very much appreciated that part of the pattern. As far as when I want to finish this sweater, Ritual Dyes is actually hosting a make-along right now. It's a Rambouillet make-along, and it is a make-along for 2 of their yarn bases that are both Rambouillet. One is Maven, which is their, I think it's a fingering weight Rambouillet yarn, and the other is Elder, which is the worsted weight, which is what I'm working with. And you have to make a project using mostly that yarn and enter it on Instagram using their hashtag. And the deadline for this make along is February 13th. So I kind of like having that deadline in the back of my head as to trying to enter this sweater into that make along so that I know I can accomplish it in a reasonable amount of time and I have a distinct goal that I'm working towards. So that's what I'm going to do with this sweater, and hopefully I can finish it in time. But I made this much progress in a week, And soon I will finish the color work chart and then it'll be easy breezy. There is a little bit more color work on the sleeves, but I'm sure it won't take very long to finish that either. So I'm excited to join that make along and also see what other people are working up with those yarns as well. My next work in progress is one that I already have shared back in December, and that is my Anthology throw by Helen Stewart. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of an anthology throw before, but this is my first time making one, and I am using my advent calendar, which was from Botanical Yarn this year. So the anthology throw was designed to use advent mini skeins, and it's a fingering weight blanket. It's hard to tell how big it is because I have it on a cable that's only like, I don't know, 50 inches or something. Every different stripe you can tell is a different mini skein. And obviously, as the blanket gets wider, the stripes are going to get thinner. And it's been really fun. It's kind of potato chip knitting. For almost all the rounds, you are just knitting in the round. And every once in a while, you have to do some yarn overs or some knit two together or things like that. But for the most part, it's just knitting in the round and then keeping track of what row you're on. So according to the pattern, I'm almost 55% of the way done, and I am on row 154. So there are quite a few rows or rounds in this blanket, but it's not something that I need to have finished anytime soon. So I'm happy to just keep working on it when I have the opportunity to. You know, there's times at the end of the day where my brain is a little too sleepy to try to do the color work chart of my sweater, but I can just knit in the round on this and watch a TV show or something like that. Or I can bring this to one of my kids' extracurricular activities and work on it while I'm there. So it's still pretty portable at this point, but it is getting quite large. Let me show you the yarn. This is my Advent, and what I'm working on right now is this one. But as you can see, I have a lot of yarn left over from each stripe. So I'm switching colors whenever the pattern says to switch colors. And in the pattern, she says she uses the whole mini skein, but obviously I am not using the whole mini skeins. I need to decide what I want to work on with those extra little bits and pieces. Now I can just add them to my fingering weight stash and save them up for color work projects or things like that. But what I really want to do is knit some stripy socks out of them in the same order that my blanket is in. And first, when I thought of this idea, I thought I would just split each ball in half and just knit it as long as it is. But then I started seeing all of the Advent socks that people knit in December, and I absolutely love the way the stripes look when they are all even. And they're like maybe 5 rows each or something like that. I think that looked really clean and crisp, and I enjoyed it a lot. So now I'm thinking I might just do it that way, and then if I have little bits and bobs at the end of that, I can either add it to the stash or toss it if it's not that much. I also have this full skein. This was the final thing to open of the Advent, and it's called Cupcake Cosmos. So I'm thinking this could be the cuffs, heels, and toes of the sock so that there's a little cohesiveness in those sections, and I think it'll just look really cute. So I'm trying to decide when I want to cast those socks on. Obviously, I haven't finished every stripe of my blanket yet, so part of me wants to just wait until I finish the blanket, because then I can just zoom through the socks and I don't have to like stop when I get to the place where I'm at with the blanket, if that makes any sense to you. Now I would love to share my finished object of the week, and that is my Farmer's Daughter Fibers Sock Squad January sock. So forgive me, I just took them off my feet. So these socks are made out of the January colorway from the Farmer's Daughter Fibers Sock Squad, and that is called Finding My Path. And this year, all of the colorways are inspired by land and she artwork. So this one is called Finding My Path. And you can see the beautiful blue and the variegated colorway. Here's what's left of the main color. I usually am not a huge fan of variegated yarns. I think that they tend to pool in weird places and don't always look as amazing as they do in the skein. But this worked up so beautifully and I'm really happy. There's like not any weird pooling, and the colors are all very complementary. The pattern that I used for these socks this month is the January Colorwork Cuff Club by Summer Lee, and that is this beautiful little scalloped edge here. And this pattern called for, here, let me do it on this side, 3 different colors. So I needed the top color and the main color, and then I needed a little third accent color here. Well, the sock squad comes with a mini skein and a full skein of sock yarn, but I didn't know what to do for that third little pop of color. I decided to check out this little book that I have called A Dictionary of Color Combinations. It's a Japanese book, and all it is different color combinations. I think this is really helpful when picking out color schemes for your projects, and whether it's knitting or a painting project or anything like that, this could be super handy to have, and I will link it down below in the description. But I'm really enjoying it and I am so happy with what I chose. So let me show you. I looked through the book to see if I could find anything. That brownish color of the main skein, the main color, and the dark blue color. Also, there's a debate online as to whether this is blue or green. I definitely think it's blue. I looked through this book to see if I can find those 2 colors combined together, and look what I found. Doesn't this match perfectly? And then the other thing is this gray. There is gray in this as well. So I was so happy to find this page. So I just knew I needed to find this golden yellow color in order to complete that color scheme. I don't have much of it left now, but I found this golden color, and yeah, that's what I decided to use for that little pop accent color in my color work. Somebody online said that they thought it looked like mountain peaks with a sunset, and I thought that was very fitting. This sock base for this month's sock squad is their Farmer's Daughter Fibers Elkhorn sock base, and that is a 80% Punta Arenas merino superwash and 20% nylon. And I didn't know what Puntas Arenas meant, but I looked it up, and it is an area in Chile. It's actually the capital city of the southernmost territory of Chile, and it is the gateway to the Patagonia Mountains, and pretty cold. There's penguins that live there and things like that. So I was thinking of these sheep that live in these mountains, and I just thought these colorways are perfect for this sock base. Also, I really like this sock base. It is so soft. I knit a lot of socks, and so I can tell the subtle differences between bases, and this one is just incredibly soft, and it soaks up the color so beautifully. I mean, the richness of this blue is unbelievable. So I'm really happy with how these turned out. Oh, the other thing I did was an Eye of the Partridge heel, the heel flap. So it is similar to a slip stitch heel flap if you have made one of those before, but it's just every other row you are slipping the opposite stitch. So you make these little diamond shaped slip stitch pattern in the heel flap, and on variegated yarn, for some reason it looks amazing. So whenever I use variegated yarn, well, not always, but I like to use an Eye of the Partridge heel flap on variegated yarn. I just think it really helps it pop and highlights those beautiful color changes. As far as the color work pattern, it is extremely simple, and I really am glad that I chose to do this because it's a very striking look to have the two sections with this perfect border in between. It's only about 8 rows of actual color work, and it's only 2 colors at a time, I think. So it's very simple to manage, and it's over before you know it, and then it's just stockinette around after that. I definitely recommend all of the Colorwork Cuff Club patterns if that's something that you're interested in dabbling your toe into. You can sign up for the Cuff Club at any time, and I think you get the whole last release patterns as well when you sign up. So even if you sign up now, you'll still get all the way back to August when it started. So highly recommend Summerlee's Colorwork Cuff Club if you are interested in adding a little bit of color work to your socks. And I don't think you have to just use the charts on socks either. I think if you are clever enough, you could add them to cowls or hats or anything that you could fit that stitch pattern onto. These socks I started on January 1st and I finished them on January 10th, and that's with knitting other things in between, so pretty pleased with how quickly they worked up as well. At the end of my video last week, I briefly touched on my knitting resolutions for 2025. If you haven't seen that video yet, make sure you check it out because I go over everything I knit in 2024 and it's a very fun video. But I thought that I would go into a little more depth about my resolutions now during this week's video and see how my current projects kind of fit into those resolutions. So my first resolution is to knit more sweaters. Now, as I have been going through YouTube and Instagram and looking at everybody's Everything I Knit in 2024 videos, I am struck by how many creators make so many sweaters during the year. Last year, I made 3 sweaters, 2 for me and 1 for my son, so it was small child sized. And I just know that I could do more than that. I know that everybody's time that they have for knitting is different. So it's not great to compare ourselves to other people. Everybody has different circumstances as to what they're able to accomplish throughout the year. But I do think that I could incorporate more sweater knitting into my schedule. And I think if my goal is to knit more sweaters next year, then I just have to knit at least 4 because that would be more. So I'm not trying to knit a dozen sweaters this year. I don't think that that's a realistic goal. I do like to knit accessories. I think that that's really fun. Obviously, I like to knit socks. So I want to make sure that I leave enough time for knitting those things that I love as well. But I do love wearing my hand knits, and having more sweaters in my wardrobe would be fun for me. I would love to style them in different ways, and I know that I would wear the heck out of them. So that is my goal. I'm not going to name specific patterns that I want to knit this year because honestly, I'm constantly getting inundated with new patterns that come out, and so, or being exposed to ones that I hadn't seen before. So I want to leave it open to what inspires me in the moment because I think I'm more likely to get excited about it and work on it if it's a thing that I'm jazzed about right then instead of something I planned to do 6 months ago or something like that. I do think that having deadlines works very well for my knitting style, and I think a great example of this is the knit along that is happening with the Rambouillet yarn through Ritual Dyes and my Easy V sweater. That has given me a natural deadline to finish that sweater on, and it helps me keep track of where I'm at in terms of being able to make that deadline. Now, I don't want to give myself things that are impossible to accomplish, and also sometimes things come up and I'm not going to be able to finish it by a certain day. So I want to have leniency and grace for myself in those moments, but trying to pick deadlines as I'm starting projects will help me keep on track of those. Speaking of deadlines, my next resolution is to knit a pair of socks every month. This was a resolution I had last year, and I was successful in completing it. So I would like to continue that this year. That was part of what I told myself when I signed up for Sock Squad again this year, was that I needed to finish a pair of socks every month in order to receive this subscription again this year, because I really don't want sock yarn to be piling up and for me to just never use it and have it just become a bigger part of my stash. So having the deadline of the end of the month for each pair of socks is really helpful in terms of figuring out what I need to be working on at that moment. I already finished my January socks and I finished them on the 10th. So I still have 21 days of the month to work on other things and even cast on a different pair of socks if that's something that I want to do. But I know come February, I'm going to get another shipment from Sock Squad and I'll have to cast on another pair of socks for those. So I just want to keep that in mind, that I want to stay on top of those and finish them every month. My next resolution is to improve my photography skills. Now, this might not seem like a knitting resolution, but as I have decided to make my knitting public by going onto YouTube and Instagram with my knitting journey, I really want to take better pictures of my finished objects in order to showcase how beautiful they are and all of the details that go into them. I think having great photography skills really shows off the time and effort that I'm putting into my craft, and I don't know. I want to be better at that. I don't think it's something that comes naturally to me. And so it's a little bit of a learning curve. But to start off, I have started doing a skill swap with one of my friends. So she is very into photography and has been for many, many years. And I asked her if she would share some of her secrets with me and help kind of tutor me with my photography. And she was like, sure, but I offered to pay her at first, actually. But then she was like, well, how about we do a skill swap? and you teach me how to knit socks. So I have started to teach her how to knit socks, and she has started to tutor me on photography. And I think that is such a fun way to learn a new skill. So I really encourage you to find a friend who has a skill that you would like to have and maybe practice a little skill sharing with each other. It's a great way for us to schedule in some social time, but I also feel like I'm accomplishing something at the same time. And we have learned a lot about each other through this time together. And I'm I'm looking forward to continuing that through the next year and seeing how both of our skills grow throughout this journey. So my next resolution is to start a scrappy project. Now, I have been successful in knitting a pair of socks with my Sock Squad yarn every month, but I'm not using the full skein. As you saw, after finishing my January socks, I still have this much left of my main full skein. I haven't weighed it, but my guess is it's over 50 grams. Obviously, those scraps pile up, and that is adding to my stash every month, even though I am producing one finished object from it. So I would like to make a scrappy project using my fingering weight sock yarn leftovers. And one project that I already have the pattern for is the Northeasterly blanket. And this is knit modularly using DPNs to make these chevron kind of panels that join together. You can make it as big as you want. You can just keep adding, and you can use up every little last bit of yarn that you have. I'm thinking I will start that at some point, maybe after I finish my anthology throw. I don't think I need more than one blanket going at once, but once I finish the anthology throw, maybe I'll start that Northeasterly blanket. Or if you have any suggestions for a fingering weight blanket that you love, or even maybe a DK weight blanket that I could hold 2 strands of fingering weight together for, something that's good for scrappy, I don't mind if it's very colorful. I am a colorful person. I enjoy making colorful items. So let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for a scrappy blanket project like that. Anyways, other than that, I will try to start that this year. I don't need to finish it this year, but it's nice to know that I have a plan for all those scraps. I do like, like that little bit of golden yellow came in handy when I wanted to add that pop of color in my socks. So I do think it is nice to have a few different colors available for color work when you only need a little bit and you don't want to have to buy a whole skein for it. This is my basket of fingering weight yarn, and it is quite full. So I definitely want to start making a dent in that this year. Final resolution for 2025 is to knit more things at once. Now, I have in the past been a pretty monogamous knitter, and I think that I'm pretty good at finishing projects that I start. So I'm thinking that if I start more projects, I will finish more projects. And also, it's nice to have a little bit of variety on the needles, so that way you don't get bored with what you're working on. This month, I have the sweater that is color work, and I have my socks, and I have my anthology blanket, and those are all great. They offer me different things at different moments depending on what I'm looking for in my knitting. I think that that's a good amount for me. I do tend to get overwhelmed when I feel like there's too many things happening at once. So I do want to keep that in mind, but I want to stretch my comfort levels a little bit in how many whips I have at once. There's a couple of hats that I really want to make, and I already have the yarn for, so I'm thinking I might cast on another hat soon. Hats are great because my anthology throw and my sweater are going to get large very soon, and a hat is always going to be portable. It's just one skein of yarn. So I do like taking my knitting places, and having a hat on the needles would be nice as well. It's a little counterintuitive for me. Like, it's not something that I think my brain would naturally want to do, is cast on more and more and more things. But ultimately, I think it might be good for me, and I will let you know how that resolution goes throughout the year, and if I start to have panic attacks by having too many things on the needles. But I doubt that will be the case. So in today's episode, I got to share my whips with you, my Easy V sweater, and my Anthology throw, as well as my finished socks, my finished January socks. Let me know which ones you like the best down below. I always love to know what you're working on, so don't forget to comment what's on your needles right now. And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe so you have more content like this in the future. Later this month, I plan to do some other pattern roundups of patterns that are catching my eye right now. I'm also planning a little trip to Portland, and I'm going to check out at least one yarn shop while I'm there, so I might take you all along for that. I always post a new video every week on Tuesdays, so be sure that you have the notification bell checked so that you will always know when I have a new video uploaded. Thank you so much for watching. And I hope that you're having a great January so far. Happy knitting. Bye.